tonight about such an important issue. Last Wednesday night and Thursday, so many in this city, as well as throughout the world, paused to acknowledge and honor the memory of the 6 million Jews and so many others who were systematically murdered as part of the Holocaust. At a time when there are repeated reports that large numbers of millennials don't understand that the Holocaust took place or acknowledge that it took place, it's important for us as a community to take the opportunity to publicly acknowledge this issue and its importance. So we're gonna hand Rabbi Jack from Temple Emmanuel the microphone, and the council's gonna come and join you down there.
Thank you, Chumi, and thank you to President Aramo and to the entire City Council for allowing us this opportunity to address the City Council and those here this evening. As the Councilwoman noted, just a couple of days ago on Thursday, we remembered Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. This coming Thursday is Israel Independence Day. These two events are 1 week apart. It is not a coincidence that these two events were placed close to each other on the liturgical calendar. The message is very clear. It's a universal one. All of us are painfully aware that the most severe and darkest periods in our lives or in history are often followed by events that bring joy and gladness. And it's something that we constantly need to remember. To be sure, you can consider the Holocaust and Israel Independence Day as uniquely Jewish historical events. You could look at it that way. I would urge you to think of those two events in a broader way. As Chumi suggested, 6 million Jews were indeed murdered at the hands of the Nazis, but 5 million others were targeted and killed by the same hatred. Lesbians and gays, mentally disabled, physically disabled, socialists, communists, political prisoners, people of color, many others. Hatred knows no names or boundaries. And the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948, a country that represents freedom and liberty and democracy, the fact that the people could return to their ancestral homeland is something that could be celebrated by all peoples. So once again, thank you for this opportunity for us to present this very brief presentation about the Holocaust and Israel Independence Day. I'll ask Gail, our religious school director, and her students to come forward.
Good evening. Good evening, and thank you for having us here tonight to talk about two of the most important days in Jewish history.
Last Thursday on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, we heard a guest speaker from the Holocaust Remembrance and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. Although we heard terrible accounts of the atrocities and the mass murderers that occurred during the Holocaust, we also heard stories of great courage.
We learned about the consequences of inaction and our responsibility to take action when we witness injustice. According to Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Prize winner Elie Wiesel, we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere.
When human lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, whenever men or women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place, at the moment, becomes the center of the universe.
We make an emotional transition from sadness to celebration this week as we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day.
70 years ago, the State of Israel was established under a similar democratic values as the United States. People come to Israel from all over the world with the pursuit of freedom, liberty, and happiness.
Both the United States and Israel are nations made up of immigrants inspired by similar values.
May our desire for liberty, security, equality, and opportunity remind us that we must never be silent in the face of evil and to always stand up for values and human rights.
So I just want to say how proud I am of these kids for their interest and their desire to tell these stories and to learn about things that are hard to learn about and to share the things that they learn. As I've told them that their children won't know survivors, they are really the last generation of children that will have heard from Holocaust survivors, and it's they're very mature and smart and intelligent kids that are standing before you and sharing the stories.
I just want to thank Rabbi Jack and Gail Rusko for coming tonight with all the students and parents for taking the time to be here to talk about this important issue. Thank you.
Good evening. In my long career in the Long Beach Police Department, I spent many years as the commanding officer of Traffic Division. In that role, we were very aggressive in DWI enforcement. A great irony is the fact that my niece was killed on the Meadowbrook Parkway by a DWI offender, and I still maintain my commitment to ridding the roads of Long Beach of drunk drivers. I've been very, very fortunate to have 4 of my staff buy into this, one in particular buy into it so greatly that we, for 2 years in a row, were the Police Department of the Year for MAD. He's been every year for the last number of years, has been honored. MAD has a policy, only one time you get Department of the Year, and we've gotten it twice, and only one officer from your department can be nominated for the award, and this year we had 4. And they were all accepted because we have a very, very aggressive program. Last year we did just under 150 DWI arrests in 1.5 square miles of real estate. So these guys are out on the roads. They all work from 10 at night to 8 in the morning when we're all safe and asleep, and they keep our roads safe. Our accidents have gone down. Where everywhere else in the country, accidents have gone up. Crashes. We have heard many times, a little curveball there. We have heard many times that DWI is not stoppable, not preventable, it's suicidal, but these 4 individuals are making a tremendous difference. And as such, in honor of them getting the award from MAD, the City Council also wishes to recognize them, and they've been gracious enough to let me make the presentation. Sergeant Nielsen. Sergeant Nielsen. There is a title, drug recognition expert. It takes 2 weeks of classroom training, and then you have to go out to Arizona, to the jail in Arizona, and test 12 individuals over a week's time, and you have to get all 12 right. You have to decide, based on their physiological and physical reactions to things, what category of drug they're on. Sergeant Nielsen is one of, I think, 4 on Long Island and maybe one of a dozen in New York State, and he's from the Long Beach Police Department. He also has developed a thing called the handoff. Because arrest processing takes a great deal of time, and a sergeant, he's the only sergeant that's out on the street when he's working, we don't want to have him have any downtime. So what he does is he prepares a very short bit of paperwork and then hands off the arrest to another officer to prepare. The benefit of this is we get him back out on the street. The ancillary benefit, or the unintended consequence, was that all of the officers that got handed the handoff became more proficient at doing the paperwork, at experiencing drunk drivers, at analyzing what was going on, that they started to take the initiative, and that's how we got to our average of 150 arrests a year for this heinous crime. So on behalf of the City Council and myself and the City Manager, I proudly present you this proclamation for your hard work. Nick Rooney. Nick is a second-generation Rooney. Nick's uncle and I were cops for many years together, and because I won't leave, now I can be with the next generation. So, Nick, congratulations. Next, we have Rocco Walsh. In addition to this, I just want to tell one little story of Rocco. One of our police officers made a car stop. Rocco was around the corner, came up on the scene, observed that the defendant had a firearm on him, pointed it at the gun. He tackled the defendant, wrestled the gun away from him, and saved both officers as well as the defendant from any injuries. So in addition to that, Rocco, thank you very much for what you do. And last but certainly not least is Officer Joe Garofalo. Joe's been with the department. He's also a sibling of another member of our department, and he's very aggressive. He's also one of our motorcycle officers, as is Sergeant Nielsen. Thank you, Joe.
All right, as our police officers walk out, let's just hear it for them one more time. Thank you guys so much. And now on to the regular scheduled meeting. Councilwoman Diamond, would you lead us in the pledge?
I still have to take the roll call. Hold on.
I'm sorry, it's like church. We're going to have to sit down. We have to do roll call.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Council of the City of Long Beach held Tuesday, April 17th, 2018 at 7 p.m. We'll have a roll call. Councilmember Bendo.
Present.
Councilmember Mandel.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Vice President Diamond.
Here.
President Aramo.
Here.
Let the record indicate the presence of Acting City Manager Michael Tagney and Corporation Counsel Robert Agostisi. We'll now have a salute to the flag.
Councilwoman Diamond, would you please lead us? Okay. Thank you again for attending this evening. I guess we will start like we usually do with the city manager's update.
Thank you. As a reminder, Phase 1 of the fully federally funded Army Corps of Engineers Beach Protection Project is complete. A contract is expected to be awarded this month for Phase 2. The Army Corps and the DEC will be hosting a meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, April 18th at 7 p.m. right here to discuss the project's next steps. If you have any questions or concerns, you can contact Senator Kaminsky's office, 516-766-8383. This weekend, on Saturday, April 21st, the Little League Parade steps off from Lindell School at 10 a.m. and marches down West Park Avenue to Kennedy Plaza. A carnival for parade participants and families will be held in Kennedy Plaza, and it really is a very fun event. This Sunday, Earth Day, the city will be hosting Earth Day in Kennedy Plaza, powered by PSE&G Long Island. The event will take place from 12 to 3, preceded by the Jellyfish Jamboree Parade on the boardwalk at Riverside starting at 11:30. It will end at Kennedy Plaza. All registered participants in the parade will receive a sand dollar that will be good for discounts to local restaurants and businesses. We hope you join us in thinking globally and acting locally. For more info, visit longbeachny.gov. Earth Day flyers are available tonight. We also are having a poetry event. All invited to join an evening of poetry with Nassau County Poet Laureate Peter V. Dugan, featuring the Barrier Islands homegrown poet, Long Beach native Harold Michaelman. Harold is also the owner of Surf Glass, and he does some very, very interesting sculptures using nuts and bolts and tools, as well as his renowned poetry. The event will be taking place at Starbucks 101 West Park Avenue on Friday, April 27th at 7 p.m.
All right. First item this evening is a public hearing for a bond ordinance authorizing financing for cost of separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city, stating the estimated total cost thereof is $2,100,000, appropriating said amount therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $2,100,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation.
Okay.
I have to open the hearing, right?
Yes.
I open the hearing.
Okay, very basically, the city of Long Beach has a bunch of different funds. One fund is there's a sick leave account, there's a personal leave account, there's an compensatory time account, and as such, when an employee leaves service, they have to be paid out for the monies owed them in these various accounts. The city, at times, throughout my entire career, has also allowed people to cash in time at various times throughout the year, their career, whether they have a cash flow problem at home or the city has the wherewithal and we can pay it off at the current rate rather than the rate that the employee makes when they retire. In my case, the day that I saved from 1978 was worth about 29 cents, and it's worth a lot more today. So it would have been much more prudent to pay that off back then than to pay it today. So what this bond encompasses is all the people that separated from service and we were obligated to pay this money that they took. Other people were anticipating separation and did receive some money. And then the third category were some hardships. This money has the most important thing for everyone to know tonight. We can revisit whether or not you like the process, don't like the process, but this money has been spent. Failure to pay us this bond will mean there will be a interruption in payroll. We will not make payroll for the end of the year. So that's the bottom line. If you vote this, if the council votes this down, we will be broke before the end of the year. Ms. Hightower, would you be willing to come up and expound upon that?
Good evening, Ms. Hightower. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank you for allowing the council to talk to you about 2 weeks ago. I think 2 weeks ago yesterday, we spoke on a conference call and you informed us everything about this, allowed us to ask as many questions as we needed to, and availed yourself to any future questions. So I thank you for being here for the public's benefit as well.
You're very welcome. It's important for everybody to understand, the purpose behind this. And, Tagny did put it very well. And in a nutshell, the city has contractual obligations to pay people out their separation pay that they're due under contracts when they leave. The city has a few options in order to finance these. You can either budget for them or you can borrow for them. For the 2018 fiscal year, the city opted to borrow for it. So in last year's budget that was adopted, you did include separation pay borrowings in order to fund these payments. These payments have amounted to about $2.1 million projected through the end of the fiscal year, so that's exactly what we're putting forward to be authorized today to make sure that the city does not have that hole in the budget at year end. At the same time, these payments have been made throughout the year, so basically the city has fronted the cash, has laid it out before it's getting reimbursed. Therefore, it's put a strain on the cash flow. So if we don't borrow it by the end of next month, the cash flow situation at the city will be dire.
And these payments have been going down year to year?
Yes, so I believe the one right before I came on board was about 5.2 million. Then I believe it was a 3.9. It was 3.2 last year, and I think it was 3.2 2 years ago, 2.4 or 5 last year, and then about 2.1 this year. So they are going down every year. And ideally, hopefully, once they get manageable, the city will eventually budget for them and not have to do this anymore.
And the ramifications if this doesn't pass?
I did take a look at cash flow. Aaron and I have been watching cash flow because this is the time of year where the city does have the least amount of cash to begin with. The last tax payments are collected in February, and there really aren't any more tax receipts until mid-July, early August. By my estimations, by the third week in May, which means by the June 1st payroll, the city will not have cash to pay both its vendors and its personnel.
The lack of payment for the vendors, what's the long-term ramifications to that?
Well, you're talking about, the employees' health insurance, which runs about $800,000 a month. Your workers' comp
I'm sorry,
insurance.
say that again. How much a month?
About $860,000 a month is your current health insurance, maybe $900 across all funds. You have your last workers' comp payment of $600,000 that's due, so you're looking at possible insurance lapses. And then this is also the time that the city's ramping up to get ready for the beach, to get ready for the season. So it would not be a great time for your vendors to stop giving your department supplies, materials that they need to get the city ready for the summer season.
Anyone from the council have any questions?
Just for point of clarification, it's been said twice in terms of the interruption of payroll. So I just want to be clear on this, that it's not going to happen this week. It's going to happen 3 weeks from now in May.
Yes,
correct?
but so the timeline. So you guys authorized this tonight. There is a 20-day estoppel period, which is subject to permissive referendum, which means that the city cannot sell any debt associated with this authorization for at least 20 business days. It usually winds up being 23, 24 by the time the clerk can actually get the notification in the paper, because it's actually from the time it's published, not from the time it's authorized, which means that the earliest you can sell this debt is like the middle of May, and then we can close the third week in May. So if it's not authorized today, let's say you decide to push it off to the beginning of May, then you can't borrow until the middle of June. It's usually a 4 to 6 week from the time you authorize it to where you can actually get the cash in hand because of the different rules.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Now, you also stated that the monies were a part of last year's budget, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so when that occurred, a couple of questions. Then why wasn't the council informed at the time that, for whatever reason, we would run out of funds right now?
Well, the timing of the running out of funds is all dependent upon what the expenses are for the year, the timing of cash flows. The city has different revenues coming in, but not all of them come in at the same time every year. So it really is dependent on timing. We do try not to borrow until you absolutely have to avoid the interest costs.
Okay, so then for the payout for exempts, then what fund was that taken out of?
Whatever fund they are in. So if the exempt is in a general fund, then it was taken out of general fund termination salaries line.
Okay, so if the money was taken out of the general fund, then why wasn't the city council informed?
That is a question for management.
Why weren't we informed that employees were paid?
Okay, but I mean, I'm sure that there's somewhere in the charter that speaks to the fact that at a certain point, if there's authorization for monies for a particular group of people, which would, in this case, would happen to be the exempts, why wasn't the city council informed? And you just said that it's a management issue. So at this point, who can answer that question? Can anyone here answer the question?
The only people who can answer that question is the management team that actually paid it out, and they're no longer here.
I would also like to point out that of the $2.1 million we're talking about, those payments are maybe $300,000, $250,000, $300,000 of this. The majority of what you're borrowing is what's paid out to your leaving cops, your CSEA, your fire. That's where the majority of it is.
Right. Well, I think we all here, we all support that, and we understand that there are hardworking people. All the people who are listed are hardworking. That's not the question here. It's not the heart of the city. We recognize that. But it's just really about due diligence in terms of information and the sharing of information once again. So that's why I'm asking the question. You stated that the exempts, there are different funds that this money is coming out of. So I'm trying to figure out how does that work? Because
Well,
this is the
when
first time
Tanya
I'm
was talking
hearing
about different
this.
funds, I believe, just to clarify, he means different buckets of accumulated time.
Okay.
So the fund is, for the most part, the general fund, and then a little bit of sewer. But the exempts, I believe, are all in the general fund. So when you talk about funds or buckets of accumulated time, you accumulate vacation, sick pay, comp time, and personal time. So those are the I think he more meant buckets of time rather than funds.
Okay.
If I may ask a question, the city charter clearly states exempts are not eligible for comp time. So how are they accumulating comp time?
They don't. When we
just
talk
said-
about
you
comp,
just said they
well, yes,
did.
because your CSEA, your fire, and your cops get paid comp time.
That's
I'm
fine,
not talking
but what
about
about the exempts?
exempts are not paid out, nor do they accumulate comp time. They are not paid out for comp time.
So I saw this list yesterday at 4 o'clock for the first time of the employees that are being paid out. And there are a number of employees on here getting sizable payouts that are still city employees. The resolution that I was handed says this is to authorize the cost of separation payments. There's a lot of people in here that are not separation payments. So, A, the resolution is not correct because it's saying it's for separation payments. So I don't know if we need to go back and split this into 2 resolutions. But, and then the other thing is, so I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation on one exempt employee who's getting a $108,000 payout. So the city charter says exempt employees can't have more than 50 days of vacation time accrued. They get 1 1/4 sick days a month. Based on this person's employment with the city, the amount of time they were here, the maximum payment I can come out with doing my math is $52,000. How is this person getting another $56,000?
As far as the individual calculations, that's done between the city manager's office and payroll. I wouldn't be privy to that information.
Okay, so thank you for that. You just segued into my next condition. So if I can't make the math work, why am I supposed to believe the numbers that are on here? I've been given, my job as a fiduciary for the city is to make sure what I'm voting on is correct and accurate and verified.
The actual numbers on the spreadsheet did come from your general ledger. So they, as far as the amounts as of 4/7/18, they came from amounts that were already paid in cash to these people.
No. I'm not saying that. So do our exempt employees keep timesheets?
From what I understand, yes.
They do. Okay. So I certainly haven't seen any justification for the amounts that are in here. That's I guess what I'm getting at is.
Well, justification for the amounts is I believe, a different conversation than whether or not these amounts were already paid out.
I'm not disputing whether they were paid out.
Okay.
But if they were paid out at incorrect amounts or amounts somebody made up or.
That would be determined internally as to whether or not anybody received any unjust enrichment through these payments.
So considering I haven't been given the information to do my due diligence, how am I supposed to vote for this?
Having due diligence to make sure that the amounts that were paid out to employees are correct is a process that should be put in place or can be put in place before payments are made to employees. These payments have already been made to employees. So by not authorizing this, you're not changing what has already happened, but you will possibly put the city in a financial position that could have consequences long term.
Or you could view it as perpetuating bad behavior.
I have a, Councilman Bennett, if you're finished, I just had a quick question based off of one of your questions. Are you able to say when these payments were made? Sorry. Is that better? Are you able to say when these payments were made?
Are you talking about the specific exempt ones that are still here? Which these payments have been any time between July 1st, 2017 through April 6th, 2018 for what's already been paid. And then there's a projection based on the payout schedules related to prior separated employees that get paid out over 3 years.
Can you just repeat the dates? I have July 1st,
Sure, so it would have been through July 1st, 2017 through now. And then it's projected through the end of the year. When most people separate, they do not get a lump sum. Most union people opt to be paid out over 2 or 3 years based on their agreement with the city. Therefore, they'll continue to get a set amount through the end of the year, and that's been accounted for here.
Is this list shown to the public?
I don't know.
Is there a reason we can't post it? They're paying for it. They deserve to know.
I mean, that's a matter for the council to discuss, absolutely. I said that's a matter for the council to discuss, absolutely.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's public information. Does anybody have any more questions for Christy Hightower? Does anyone wish to speak from the audience? I called Mr. Duval, sir.
What?
Okay.
I was in the middle, I guess. Good evening, Roy Lester, 72 Boyd. I think most of you guys know I'm a bankruptcy attorney, and I have clients come in every day, and they tell me, I ask them, well, what led into this problem? And they said, well, we spent money, and we didn't have it. I don't see the difference here. Basically, what I've been told this evening is you spent money, and now if we don't pay it, we're going to default on it. And we not only did it this year, we did it the year before, and we did it the year before, and we did it the year before, and we did it the year before. Did I hear wrong? Well, I mean, I'm listening to this, and I don't understand if you're budgeting. What I heard, the direct quote was, we could either budget for them or borrow for them. How is that a way to run a city? How is that a way to run a municipality? Where you either decide you're going to pay it and then borrow for it, or you properly budget for it. What am I missing? No answer, I guess. I just don't understand it. Now, it's also, the legislative memo says it's for retirement funds and other financial commitments and obligations. Yet, when you're looking at the ordinance, it's basically saying for cost of separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city. This isn't for separation payments, from what I heard. This is for payments that we've already made. And now we need the money. We need to borrow the money to make our payroll and pay our vendors. Did I hear that wrong? The silence is deafening. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Well, now that you've concluded your comments, I think I can respond to both of them. I think that when we went through the budget process last year, there were a number of considerations that each of us took into account. One of them was the impact of a tax increase on the residents of the city. There are things that we are able to bond for so we can pay in the out years, so to limit the number the percentage of tax increase. We need to consider the fact that a number of these employees that were let go had years of service to the city and have since retired, whether they were CSEA employees, whether they were police employees. We can all debate whether we think that these payments were appropriate or not appropriate. The problem that we are faced with right now is that we entered into a budget, and we all passed it unanimously, besides Mr. Bendo, that accounted and included an understanding that separation pay, which is very common, and the reason why the statute allows you to bond for separation pay is that most municipalities actually bond for separation pay because it is an enormous bill that if you converted it into a tax increase would have been unmanageable for our residents. So taking all of those things into consideration and the fact that there were a number of employees that were retiring who needed to be paid out pursuant to their contracts, that we were going to bond this portion, which is in compliance with the statute. Your other question, what was the other question?
You're not bonding this part. What you
Excuse
did was...
me, we paid, let me finish. I let you
Certainly.
finish your comments.
Oh, certainly. I thought you were.
You pay it out as it comes up with an understanding that that portion of the budget is going to be filled by bonding for this amount of money. At least that's how it was explained to me. That's how I understood it at the time when we were passing the budget, and we were all aware of the fact that this was something that we were going to do. We praised the fact that the number had been decreased over time, whether it was through bargains, negotiations with the different unions about how things are paid out and how this works. I think that this simply is an opportunity for us to look to how we are going to continue through the end of the year. We can all debate whether it was appropriate, not appropriate. Nobody wants to wake up tomorrow in a city that is no longer going to be able to function. There are employees from our city who have retired who are entitled to get this money. And there are employees who work here at the city right now who I'm not prepared to take away the money that they get in their paychecks to pay for food, clothing, and their children and their families. We can debate whether it was right or wrong that these payments were made, but we're faced with one situation. We need to make sure that we can continue to run a city and that the employees that work hard and the vendors that provide us with different things are paid. The alternative to that is years of litigation that will cost the city tremendous amounts of money, and that's something that I'm not prepared to do.
All right, Ms. Diamond, first of all, yes, you're talking about employees that work for the city, but we're not privy to that. For some reason, the public's not privy to that. You guys all know what the amount is and who the people are. But for some reason, we're being kept in the dark. I don't understand that. Number two, the proper way to do this, and Mr. Tagney knows this because that's how the school works. We don't borrow. We put money aside to pay for retirements. We put money aside to pay for people that are going out of service. And that's the proper way to budget. And believe me, I handled the budget, and Mr. Tagney did too, and he did a great job of it. Handled a budget much bigger than the city's budget. And that's how we did it. We didn't say at the end of the year, oh, guess what? We're out of money. Let's borrow money. And we didn't do that year after year after year. I understand you've done it now, and, I don't know what to say. You need to borrow the money because you've already spent it, and that's exactly what you told us. You've already spent the money. So I guess we have no choice, do we?
I think as Ms. Hightower had said, and as we said in the budget presentations earlier this year, the goal is to not have to bond for this. The numbers have come down long before I was on the council. She just mentioned that 5 years ago, I think, what did you say? It was $5 million? So we're decreasing the amount with the hope that it will be a manageable number that we can put in the budget that won't impact our residents dramatically just to pay this particular bill.
It's great you're decreasing it, but you're still spending more than you're taking in. That's a formula for bankruptcy. Thank you.
Mr. Dubau. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Lou Dubau. Quick question. I know years ago the city was in financial ruin, for lack of a better word, and we've gotten better through the years, and I thought there was a rainy day fund. Is there not a rainy day fund? And if there is, could that be used for?
No. What we have the fund balance is pretty much tied up with FEMA. We had to lay out a lot of the money for the hundreds of millions of dollars, $100-something million in repairs. As that money was laid out, then we get reimbursed from FEMA. That restores our fund balance. But then another bill becomes due from the boardwalk to the bulkhead to the different things. So we're constantly funding. So right now we have $4 million in the bank from FEMA that's due to pay off a RAN in June, and then we had on the last agenda another $4 million that we laid out that we're going to borrow and get paid back from the money we laid out with FEMA. So we have so much money invested in FEMA. We're actually a creditor.
That FEMA owes the city.
Yes.
So that's
so
really
we don't have the money liquid.
Right.
Right now, we're actually hedging whether or not we will get the $4 million due us from FEMA before we have to borrow it next month. Because
Okay,
we spent the money and we have to pay it back.
Right. So basically, the rainy day fund is tied up in the money that's owed to FEMA?
That's my understanding.
Right.
That's owed from FEMA, not to FEMA.
Actually, from the state.
Oh, but it's not.
From the
It's
state,
money
yeah.
that's owed to
To us, from the state.
Not money that we owe to either FEMA or the state, but it's
Correct.
money that
Yes.
is incoming
It's
for
coming
us.
to the state.
We have IOUs.
Yeah,
That's what it
right,
comes down
right,
to.
Okay. And one other thing, when you guys speak, really speak into the mic. I always sit in the front because I could never hear if I was sitting in the back. So when you talk, into the mics. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dubow. Ms. Hightower, can you just explain the rainy day fund?
So what people refer to as the rainy day fund is really the fund balance that's sitting in, for the most part, general fund. New York State sets certain guidelines as far as where your fund balance should be to maintain a healthy fiscal environment. The rock bottom for a general fund is about 5%. They recommend 10%, but they really don't like to see less than 5%. Right now, the city is probably about just under 5%. So whatever rainy day fund is left needs to be left there to weather any unforeseen emergencies. There's really nothing available really to, because understand if you use your rainy day fund, it's going to go down by $2 million. So now instead of $4 million, you have $2 million. On an $80 million budget, that's a very small amount to have to help float from month to month.
I have just a quick follow-up question. When we were on a conference call, I was actually on a conference call with you and Councilman Bendo. Same question came up. What's the status of the rainy day fund, and what do we have on hand and why? You'd expressed to us that due to our deficit financing, there was almost a prohibition against a certain amount in a rainy day fund. Can you explain that?
Yes, so there are certain IRS rules around borrowing, especially municipal borrowing, and it's really engendered in the fact that when you buy municipal debt and own municipal debt, the income you make from it is tax exempt. So the IRS likes to limit the amount of tax exempt debt that's out in the market because then people don't buy the debt that the government does make taxes on. So the IRS has all sorts of rules as to how you can't burden the tax exempt market. And the way it works is the city's under deficit financing. So anything really over anywhere from 5 to 8%, they allow you to have about a 1 to 2 month reserve to be able to pay bills as they come due and wait for receipts to come in. But above that amount, you really can't borrow anymore or allow your fund balance to really accumulate above that. Anything above that, you need to use it to pay down some of that debt. So what the city has done over the last few years, because we did have a decent rainy day fund, is except for this year's budget, but for all the budgets for I think 3 budgets prior to this, we appropriated fund balance to pay down the deficit financing principal and interest in order to use that rainy day fund to get it down to a level where the IRS would deem it acceptable for us to still be in compliant with the deficit financing legislation that we're still under.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Just state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Karen McGinnis. I'm at 102 Pennsylvania Avenue. This bond issue is a done deal. It's water under the bridge. But what I ask of the council at this time is I don't want to hear explanations. I want to hear solutions. And the solution to this is to actually talk to the payroll clerk who has to certify the payroll. And as a city council member, you have a right to ask for that payroll. You actually have a right to ask for it every month. You should be able to see who's accruing vacation ridiculously and why, so that you're not giving away, which right now looks like hundreds or maybe even millions of dollars in time that was not earned. That comes out of my pocket. And second, with the upcoming budget, I suggest that the council members have, which they have the right to ask for, is a financing schedule of any bond issuances coming up for the upcoming budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please state your name and address for the
Mary
record.
Balasevich, Long Beach. As I understand what you were talking about before, there are some people that got separation pay that still work for the city. My husband didn't get separation pay until he left his job, and that was in a course of over 3 years. Why are people getting, they can't all have, because the list looked pretty long from when Mr. Bendo put it up. All these people had some emergency financial situation that they needed to pay out right away. And why do you not budget? And I will, as Mr. Lester said, the school budget, you vote on it, then you spend. You don't spend and then take a vote on it. That's just not right. You're putting your workers in a pickle, you're putting the taxpayers in a hardship, and it just seems like, you know, what are we supposed to do? Tell families they can't have a paycheck because nobody really looked at this and balanced it? You're really very unfair to both your workers and the taxpayers.
Please state your name and address.
Mike Delory, Long Beach. Mr. Frazier, I just want to, these are just my questions. Councilman Bendo kind of really went over all of the questions that I would have. I'm sure others have. It's a budget issue, timing. The one thing that Ms. Volasevich just said is something that I would have a question on as well. If somebody's continuing to work, they're not separated, so why would they be paid already, or can that be deferred to next budget year? These are my questions. Also, the cost of the $2,100,000 at an approximate 3% interest rate, because I don't know what the cost of funds are, it's about $450,000 a year. And I just wanted to make sure that that money is in the budget if this was anticipated in this past budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hightower? Can you speak to the interest rate? Potential interest rate?
Okay, if I answer in order?
Yep.
Okay, so the first question is as far as them being deferred to next year. These amounts have already been paid out, so they can't be taken back. Especially, tax years run. Most of the people you're talking about as far as that were paid out before separating happened in 2017. So now that we're in 2018, there's no mechanism to take back money paid in a prior year to an employee, unless through back pay or whatnot. As far as the interest rate, the city borrows anywhere between 3 and 3.5 long term. So the $450,000 a year over the 5 years is an accurate figure. However, what the way that the city structures this type of borrowing is we couple it with other capital borrowings that have anywhere from 15, 20, 25, 30 year PPUs, and what you can do is you can use a weighted average. So the city actually gets anywhere from 12 to 15 years to pay these off. We don't have to pay it off in 5, which is what Ms. Diamond had alluded to, that we can smooth it out. As far as adding it to the budget, I wanted to say it before. This $2.1 million would have been additional 6 to 7% property tax increase if included in the budget. So while I guess that should be a long-term goal for the city to start budgeting for these, in reality it is a large property tax increase to put them on the budget.
And go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up question. Can you speak to why there would be separation pay for employees who have not separated?
That is a management decision as to whether or not they pay out employees certain things. Some people are allowed to cash out some comp time. I know from when I was here, I know that there are some employees that their job is to such, and they're kind of the only person who does what they do. They very rarely can take a vacation or any length of time off. Therefore, they're usually allowed to cash 1 or 2 weeks in because they can't take their vacation. Sometimes that's done. It is a relatively small amount compared to the amounts for separating employees.
When you said comp time, earlier you were asked about exempts accruing comp time. Is it solely comp time, or is it other amounts that are accrued?
Exempts don't accrue comp time to be paid out, no. But your police, fire, and CSEA workers all do.
What would exempts accrue?
Exempts accrue sick, vacation, and personal.
And is that what some exempts were paid out, sick, vacation, and personal?
Yes.
Once those are paid out, what happens to the bank that exempt would accrue?
For example, let's say somebody was paid out 100 hours on vacation, their bank is reduced by 100 hours, so that when they separate later on, then you don't pay those hours at the higher rate.
When you say separate later on?
Whenever they leave employment.
So if they're paid out at their current rate?
Yes.
If later on they had a pay increase, they'd be paid later on at that higher rate?
If the hours were still in the bank, yes, but they're not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have a quick question again about last year's budget. So just based on this conversation, is it fair to say that the bond amount was actually counted as anticipated revenue?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just have a question in terms of, we want to get to a point, obviously, we want to get to a point where this is included in the budget.
Right.
Is this a fairly common practice for municipalities that are in the financial situation that we are in, which I think most municipalities are in?
In this financial condition, yes, it's definitely common. Ideally, once the city can afford to budget for them, you would put in kind of a set amount, even at, let's just say it's $2 million, and then long term, what a great policy would be is, let's say, so you budget $2 million, let's say 1 year it's $1.2 million, and you have an extra $800,000. You can either, put that in a reserve to use towards next year's budget, and budget less for the one time, or what you can do is you can allow employees to cash out certain accumulated time that will be paid at separation anyway, and lower those payouts at retirement. That way you're paying it at a lower rate. You're going to pay it eventually, whether through them taking time and paying somebody overtime, or whether they get paid out of retirement at a higher rate. So if you have a policy where certain people can cash out a certain number of vacation days, provided that the city has that amount available, it's a way to reduce your long-term liability associated with these payouts, and also get them under control long-term. But the city's just not there yet. There's just been a lot of financial hurdles the city has tried to come over in the last 5 years, and it's going to be a long process. Deficit financing alone is a 10-year process.
And we're
So we're not even
3 years, 3 years into
Four.
deficit, 4
4
years
years
into
in,
deficit
yeah.
financing. Okay.
So our debt has been increasing dramatically over the last several years. It's continuing to go up. At what point do we bend the needle and stop that?
That is an administration and a council decision. As far as if you want your debt to go down, there's a few things you can put in place. You can look at what you're paying down in principal every year, which, for example, next year is about $8.7 million you're paying down in principal. So you can limit borrowing to, let's say, $7 or $8 million, so you know that it's going to go down by $1 million next year, but you have to limit that borrowing. The biggest borrowing the city actually does every year is your capital borrowing. Right. Last year, you authorized $9.5 million in city capital funding.
So the city, over the last several years, has not shown that fiscal discipline to do that. And we continue to borrow more, and we're now burdening the people that will be sitting up here 5 or 10 years from now. So a $450,000 debt service is going to be a 1.5% tax increase next year, roughly, correct?
Yes, but as I mentioned, with the weighted average, I estimate the actual debt service will probably be between 175 and 2.
Correct. So now we're making it their children's problem.
Well, it's not going out that long. It's not going out decades.
It could go out to 15 years.
So it could. But it's a way to smooth it out so that you don't have such a huge property tax increase there. There is an option for the council can very well direct the city manager to include them in the budget next year, increase taxes accordingly, and then you fix this going forward. But that's definitely a directive that the city council has to decide on.
And you would recommend how much if we wanted to do that? $2 million? That's the figure you mentioned before? Because that's
That
where
would
we're
pretty
at.
much
It's
make
been
sure that
coming
you
down.
wouldn't have to borrow for the next few years. I feel that they'll probably stay around there. And there are other, policies the city can put in place, make sure that, over the last few, in trying to turn around the finances of the city, there are a lot of retirement incentives to try to get, the older workforce out, get a younger workforce in. I know that now there's contributions related to new hires, related to health insurance. So, the newer workers, between the health insurance contribution, between the new tiers and retirement, they do cost proportionately less than your older workforce. So there were retirement incentives offered to, move out and attrit out, not replace some positions. The city has kind of run its course on that. From pretty much whoever leaves, you have to replace now. You're running pretty lean in your full-time force. So you can, have a policy to not do any more retirement incentives when people leave. And, what they're supposed to get per their contract is what they get. There's a way to possibly work with employees and have a longer payback period, maybe pay it over 5 years. Or if you're going to pay it over 3 years, maybe for 1.5 years, you don't replace that position to help pay for the first 1.5 years of the payout. Okay. There's different avenues that the city can go. It's just a matter of what is the most palatable.
Okay.
But the establishment of a $2 million fund would equate to roughly a 7% tax increase, correct?
Roughly.
Anyone else from the public? Miss? Please state your name and address for the record.
Nora Egan. I'm just wondering, is Jack Schnurman one of the people that are part of getting a payout? Because he did not fulfill his contract with the city, as I'm sure you're aware.
Jack did get a payout, yes.
He did?
Yes.
But why would he get one when he didn't fulfill his contract?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. His contract was over at the end of on December 31st.
Okay, so he knew so he gave written notice before he won the election that he was quitting? November 8th was the election.
No.
So it states in his contract that the employee shall give the employer, the city, 2 months written notice in advance. So if he didn't give
my understanding is that his contract ended on December 31st.
Of what year?
Of last year.
2017.
Because the council, this is my understanding, and Rob will correct me if I'm wrong, the council gave him a contract, gives any city manager a contract should they choose. But on January 1st, the composition of the city council changed.
Right.
So the new city council cannot be beholden to a contract with someone else. So his contract is voided on December 31st of the previous year when the new council takes office. Is that correct, Rob?
It is, but I think to answer your question, I don't remember, and I haven't seen the contract in a while.
I have it right here.
Okay, I haven't seen it in a while, though. And I don't believe that his payouts were necessarily governed by the contents of that contract. They are governed by the code for exempts, though. I don't recall. If you have it in front of you, maybe you can.
Okay, so it says, in the event the employee resigns during the term of this agreement, the employee shall be compensated, blah, 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 blah. Okay, where I just got lost. Yeah, okay. In the event the employee voluntarily resigns his position, did he or did he not voluntarily resign with the employer before the expiration of his term of employment, then the employee shall give the employer, the city, 2 months written notice in advance unless parties agree otherwise. So is there an agreement with parties, and who would the parties be?
I don't think that necessarily would.
So why, to me it reads...
If I can just answer your question, I don't think that what you just read would necessarily relieve the city of its obligation under the code to issue that payout.
So we're just going to give them money?
The code is always going to wind up superseding anything in that contract. And I don't think that you've read anything from that contract which would, again, relieve the city of its obligation to pay out an outgoing employee.
But did he give us 2 months written notice?
I mean, I worked for him, so it wasn't given to me.
So who would have been given to?
I'm sorry?
Who would it have been given to?
Yeah, but she's saying what Ms. Egan, I believe, is attempting to say is that Mr. Shearman didn't provide proper notice of his
He
departure.
didn't. Well, you know, as far as I'm concerned, he didn't. Like, if he won the election, like, November 8th, and I think we didn't know the results until, like, really, like, November 9th, and then he came into office January 1st, you have holidays and weekends, like, you're not getting your 2 months.
No, I understand your point.
So does that not make his contract null and void, or?
No, it definitely would not under those circumstances.
It doesn't make his
the payout obligation exists separate and apart from his contract.
And is that like a side item here that I'm missing somewhere? I don't see it in the contract, like that there's any.
Well, you don't need something to say the city code applies. It always applies, regardless of whether it's embedded in that contract or not.
Okay.
Can you just explain?
Could you just explain it, like, just for the Irish in us that don't understand this?
There's a section of the city code that governs payouts for exempt employees. That provision applies, especially if the contract is silent on that point. I hope I clarified it.
So it's silent on that part. Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
But I would like to hear Mr. Mandel's question, too.
I was going to ask some question if you could explain.
Okay.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying there's a difference between the salary pursuant to the contract and the payout pursuant to the code?
There absolutely is, yes.
And is that that's your response to Ms. Egan's question?
Correct.
One has nothing to do with the other?
Correct.
Okay, I was confused. I just wanted to get that clarified.
So I have a question along these lines then. So the example that I gave earlier was our former city manager. And if you follow the code, if he was a city employee for 6 years and never took a sick day, and you took all his accrued vacation time that the charter allows, and based on his salary, he should have been paid $52,360. He got $108,022. Now I'm being asked to vote for something that approves that, and nobody can explain to me why he got paid more than double what the city charter says he should have been paid.
Okay, the explanation was given earlier, but maybe it wasn't exactly clear. There are employees that do not have the luxury of taking time off. I happen to be one of those for the last 4 months. I have not taken a day off since I've taken on the 2 jobs. So should I be penalized when I separate for not having to take time off? And when you're calculating that, you're using the 50-day maximum formula. I can tell you, as a matter of course, Jack had way more than 50 days of vacation time or whatever bank you're talking about, just by virtue of the fact that I was appointed as acting city manager, so I had to be noticed whenever he was leaving town or taking vacation, and I think there were 3 vacations he took in the 6 years. So that number is way skewed.
Okay, so the city charter does not allow an exempt employee to get comp time. It is clear. The city charter does not allow an exempt employee to have more than 50 days of vacation accrued. If he was paid out at a higher rate, then the city charter was violated.
There's nothing to say. I have no way of ascertaining what the payout would be.
I'm sorry,
So
Mr.
how-
Agostisi, we couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry.
So I was just asking, so then how do we know how he was paid out? Or how do we know how anyone was paid out?
But
What
don't-
formula was used is what I mean, Ms. McGinnis.
Don't city employees have, like, clock in or time out sheets, or they do have time sheets?
Correct.
So I know that Mr. Schnurman has been at events that I've taken time off work personally for, and I don't honestly believe that he's taken the time, or he had taken the time off. So if we want to go back and read the diaries or read the time-in clocks and, like, see, can we do that before we give an employee, like, their payout? Like, do we have to, like, pass off on this?
Well,
Can we do, like, a little bit of some kind of an audit on what has been going on?
The payouts were issued already. So
So then why are we having this meeting if they've already been
issues.
Well, that's one of the points that the former controller and the city manager made, was these funds have been expended, and now we're obligated to pay for it in order to make payroll. As the former controller very succinctly stated before, this is what's done is done. It's water under the bridge, as another speaker said.
So you gave somebody pay, and you're going to have somebody who can't get pay. Just
So
okay. Thank you.
I think everyone sitting up here is somewhat disappointed and appalled by what's happening and how these payouts are created. But this already happened. So what I'm thinking is, moving forward, I think the council needs to meet and discuss possible resolutions for payouts moving forward. I think that's what we need to do. But unfortunately, this isn't the time for that, because we're speaking about a bond, and we're speaking about a bond to borrow money from money we already spent. However, as I did say, this is something moving forward that I think the entire council needs to revisit on payouts in the future. I don't think any of us is happy about this, but it is the hand we were dealt. So is there anyone, next speaker? I mean, it sucks, though, but it sucks.
Yeah, hi, good
Please
evening.
state your name and address.
Sure, Jay Gusler, Long Beach. I'm going to use your words, Mr. Aramo. I, too, am disappointed and appalled at the council's actual or feigned lack of understanding of how this all came to be. When I say feigned or actual, I'm sure that at least 3 of you have actual knowledge of it. I'm sure 2 of you are kind of kept in the dark. How you can ask a council member to vote on something when he was only informed about the specifics of the expenditure the day before is unconscionable to me. However, it's not without precedent here in this city. Now, just for the benefit of those of you who don't know, the way my understanding of what was discussed by Ms. Hightower is there are payments that were made, contractual obligations, let's say. Some were called separation payments, and now it apparently some of this money is going to people who aren't separating. Now, I can't speak to this PVA contract. I can't speak to the CSEA contract, but when I was a Long Beach paid fireman, we had a provision in our contract that allowed us to take pay downs, which was you could take a partial payment of money that you were owed against your various banks of time. We were capped out at $10,000 a year per member, and it was at the discretion of the city manager. If the city manager determined that the city didn't have sufficient cash flow to pay you the pay down, you didn't get it. Now, what it seems to me here is that's what happened. Now, unless there's some mandatory provision in these other bargaining units contracts, and I certainly know that there's none in any exempt employee contract that mandated that you pay them down, then it seems to me that you guys had the discretion not to, and you chose to anyway. Now, you're coming to us and saying, well, we've given away this money, obligated to give it away, debatable. Obviously, discretion was exercised by somebody to pay this money, and you're saying we now need to bond in order to replace the monies that we've already spent. And if you don't do this bond and you don't get this money, that somehow other city services are going to be held hostage, that those other city services are going to have to cease if this money isn't passed. How about we go to the 5th floor of City Hall and just start trimming the millions of dollars in wasteful salary and benefit packages that are given to political hacks before we start holding services to the public hostage to your fiscal irresponsibility. Don't pass this bond.
So there is not millions of dollars on the 5th floor, and we're all provided the exact same information. Last year, the budget was voted unanimous, knowing that we were going to have to borrow for separation pay. Did anyone up here know separation pay includes folks that may still be here? I think your time is. Let me finish. So did anyone up here know that? No, I don't think any of us were informed that. Did we all vote unanimously for a budget that included borrowing for payouts because we can't increase taxes by that much to currently save for an expense we know we're going to have? Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go back before you probably even lived in town to City Manager Harold Poor, who made a budget presentation, the first and only budget presentation by a city manager that I ever saw, where he discussed, or actually disclosed, the amount of unbonded debt that the city was looking at in by virtue of all of the various forms of hours that were owed to its workforce. Harold Poor, who can date that? 15 years ago? 16 years ago? 2003. Okay. He said then it was $20 million in unbonded debt for employee accrued time. That number has got to be 4 or 5 times that now. How do you guys not know? You're just going to ignore it? It's there. Prepare for it. You know, if you don't budget for it, you're going to have to bond for it. Don't act like you guys didn't know about it.
No, I told you. I said we didn't know we were going to have to make
How
payments,
much
and
does
we
the city owe
planned
right now
to bond.
to its
we
employees?
planned to bond. We planned
Can you
to
assign,
bond
can you
for the
assign a
$2
dollar
million.
value right now to the amount of time that is owed to the city workforce? Do you have a
Thank
dollar
you,
value?
Mr. Gusso.
I'm
Thank
sorry?
you. Thank you, Mr. Gusso.
You don't have a dollar value. That's irresponsible.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Joe Robson, Long Beach. Councilman Bendo was saying that he sees a major discrepancy. That concerns me because if he's off by that much money, I know me also being a member of the fire department, if I left with those hours, you see my hours, there's no confusion there. But you're saying the city manager left and there's a huge conspiracy, to me it seems like, with the hours, and you're saying it's water under the bridge. To me it sounds like criminal activity. I mean, if it was me, I'd be locked up. So, I mean, I don't blame him for asking these questions. And how can you say it's water under the bridge?
That's not the expression I used, and that was the phrase Mr. Lester used. No.
Eileen Hessian, Long Beach.
Thank you.
To go along with what he said, Jack was up here with his initial comments every single meeting, saying that we were doing so much better, we're okay, we don't have to worry about money. He was like lollipops and roses all the time. I think it's criminal what he's done. And when you say that we should look at moving forward, some of the questions that come up here, I think the council, did you ever look at this stuff? Did you ever look at the budget? Because when you're asking some of these questions, it sounds as if you know nothing. Now, you said moving forward, we'll look at some of these things. I suggest we move backward. Many people in Long Beach got money from New York Rising. New York Rising looked backward and called them and said, we want our money back. I think we should do the exact same thing. Early on, Jack wanted medical benefits for life for himself.
That was not.
And
That
was
was not
canceled.
Mr. Schumann. That was when he was on vacation. I was not on the council
Well, anyway,
then, but I was in the
we
audience.
know what that was.
And remember.
I would suggest that he probably orchestrated this deal for himself when this, whatever, Mr. Agostisi said the management team that worked on it are all gone, and he's gone. I think you should look back and get that money back, just like New York Rising is. If he doesn't deserve that money, why should he get it? It's ridiculous that we have to suffer for that. I also have a question for something that came up earlier. Did you say that the employees get 1.5 sick days per month?
I'm not exactly sure.
They get 1 1/4.
1 1/4. All right, that's 15 days a year of sick days that they can accrue, plus vacation, plus one other thing. I think you should start looking at those contracts again. Most people get 3 sick days, and they use them if they're sick. They don't save them up and get all these big payouts. I mean, look at what you're paying some people and look at the benefits that they're getting and make some strong decisions about this. It's like, it's not good.
Just let me.
And I think the council has not had any leadership. You keep blaming the last administration, which how long ago is it now? It's ridiculous to blame them. And then you ask questions, you don't know what's going on. And you just keep tossing it back to us and to pay more taxes or more fees.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak? I see a hand back here.
While he's walking up, Ms. Hessian, just for your information, when an employee is paid out for their sick time, they can only cash out 30% of their accrued sick time, not 100%.
Name and address, please.
Sam Pinto, Long Beach, speaking as a citizen, a resident, a city worker, and primarily a union leader. Quick question. Do the exempts have a contractual obligation on the schedule for their payouts?
As described previously, Mr. Pinto, it's governed by the code.
Covered by the code. Another question. What takes priority? Their payouts or the workers' salaries? If there's a discrepancy, because there's issues with things not being seen in the code.
They're all priorities.
They're all priority. I'm saying it. Say right now we don't bond this. Do they get delayed or do we not get payroll?
Here's the story. Let me explain it. There are contractual obligations. There are contractual obligations at play here. Most of the employees, I think all but 0.3 of this are guaranteed by contract that we have to pay. We have no choice. And nobody takes priority over another person. Everybody's a priority. And making payroll is a priority for everybody in this building.
So my question is, what takes priority? If we don't bond this, payroll is going to stop or they're going to have their payouts delayed?
The pay, as described.
Even if they didn't happen yet. Those payouts didn't happen, what happens?
The payouts happened.
They already happened. They all already happened.
Yeah.
So I just have a question, because you keep talking about the city code, city charter. Section 20, Part 6 lays out that the city manager should be giving a report at every single council meeting, any change in personnel. And that hasn't happened once under Jack Schneerman's tenure. So how do you expect for him to publicly announce these things at the meetings if he doesn't do it?
The personnel report's filed once a month.
Publicly announced, right here.
It's right here.
At the first meeting of every month.
Every month.
It was at the last meeting.
So how come it isn't formally announced? So why is it put up on a wall instead of you guys saying? Because it seems like not everyone knows when people are having their payouts or their separations of service. If it's not explained, it's just hidden on a piece of paper. Why can't we get into the option of actually publicly announcing it? And it includes.
That's something that Mr. Bendo brought up previously. I think it's worthy.
Excuse me 1 second. Mr. Frazier does announce that at every meeting.
You're talking about you're talking about the monthly personnel report. These are two separate things we're talking about. You conflated two different things, Sam.
Okay, so I mean, I'll read the code, and I don't know if it happens, and
It
that's
does.
my question.
That's
Okay,
it,
so I have
that's
no
it.
reason to read it, but I will read something else because it seems to be a little bit of miscommunication on behalf of the council. It comes from the January Herald, where it says Schneerman formally resigned as city manager on January 1st. So that means his contract wasn't up December 31st. And as part of his contract with the city, so because of his contract, he was entitled more than $100,000 in unused vacation and sick leave. These were according to documents obtained by FOIL. The next paragraph actually ends up with a quote from Mr. Ramo. It's a big loss for Long Beach, but our loss is the county's gain. He's going to do a great job. We still have a lot of work to do in Long Beach, but he set us on the right path. Come on, let's be real, guys. This is not a proper path. You can't expect members of the council to vote for things that are not clearly explained. You can't expect the workforce to be worried about not getting paid because of bonding issues. And you can't expect the taxpayers to be put at battle with the workforce because they're not going to get paid or it's going to be a tax increase. It's not good government, guys. We should really do better than this. Thank you.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Joy McCarthy, 28 Wyoming. I just want to make sure he's only getting the one payout, right? Because you guys said. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was loud enough. I want to make sure that he's only getting the one payout because you said that they're paid out over 3 years. Or is that just contractual?
Yeah, that's under certain union contracts. You do get
You
paid out
over
under 3 years, but
so
for
he's only getting the one payment then, not.
that's what he elected.
Okay.
Lump sum.
All right. No,
Correct.
I just didn't want it to be 108 next year.
No. This is
Okay,
it.
That's it. Okay. Well, I think you opened the door for my 3 minutes of good and welfare, but I'll wait.
Okay. Anyone else from the public? Anything else from the council? Seeing no hands, I close the hearing.
On to the regular calendar. Item 1 is a bond ordinance authorizing financing for cost of separation payments to and for benefit of employees of the city, stating estimated total cost thereof of $2,100,000, appropriating said amount therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $2,100,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation. A hearing has been held on this item already. Item 2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements for the operation of additional food trucks at the city's Riverside Food Market Smorgasbord.
Yes, with the reconfiguration of the Smorgasbord, we've realized 3 additional spaces that local businesses have requested to be able to put a truck there. So we're going to increase the number of trucks and the diversity of the food, and all of these vendors will be paying the city. The 3 new vendors will be paying a total of $17,837.90. Yes, it's the Waffle Cabin from down west, the Gourmet Mobile Express from Rockville Center, and a chopped salad from Freeport. The first 2 are paying bid $6,000 for the option, and the chopped salad bid $5,837.90 for the total I mentioned previously.
Any questions from the council?
The vendors pay, I believe it's about $6,000 for the summer each. Sorry, the vendors pay about $6,000 for the summer each. So with 12 vendors, that would be $72,000. Do we know what the city spends on utilities and cleaning and maintenance of the area?
No idea.
Okay, so we don't know if we're actually losing money on I mean, it's a good thing. We all like it, but we don't know if we're subsidizing the operation.
Well, there's, it's an interesting conundrum. You have a operation of city government that's going on during the day. So granted, our cleanup crews, our highway department does go down there and clean it up. That's just another one of their jobs. So if you were to price out cutting grass, and it would be very similar to that. So it's a nice thing that we provide for the city that really is not worth the exercise
So
of
we're
a
not
cost
incurring
assessment.
overtime?
No, there's no overtime associated
So
with
it's
this.
just part of the normal routine?
Yes.
And my understanding is all the contracts are up next year. Is that right? Because these were initial contracts were right after Superstorm Sandy, where we tried to start something.
The first round of them.
The first round of them are expired next year, so then bidding may change. Anyone from the public? Seeing no hands, next item.
Item 3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend the current agreement for asphalt overlay work.
Okay, as you're all aware, we had a very brutal winter. There are numerous potholes that we've repaired, and some of the roads were in such disrepair that they needed an overlay. An overlay is much different from a pothole repair, where you just add cold patch in the winter and then come back in the spring and seal it. This is an actual overlay of an entire road that DPW has inspected and is confident that the infrastructure, all of the services beneath the road service, do not need to be repaired or altered in any way, so that the overlay is a reasonable accommodation and it keeps our roads in good shape.
I have a question for the commissioner.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you could just speak a little bit to the project specifically that's mentioned, the Riverside Boulevard and East Fulton Street. It's my understanding that's the parking lot at the MLK Center.
That's correct. That was a drainage improvement and a overlay of the parking field, which was about $18,000 of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to know what else included in the project?
I just wanted, well, sure.
Okay. Just so you know, we had a $400,000 budget for the overlay project, which included the parking field at the MLK Center, but also Beach Street from Nevada to Tennessee, Chester Street from Neptune to Curly, and Broadway from Maple to Pacific. And generally in asphalt projects, we mill the road, and when we put the bid out for the contract, we do it based on the square footage of road that we're actually going to overlay. But when you do milling, you get different fluctuations in the amount of asphalt that actually goes down. So the amount that we put in the bid was a little off. So we still did have enough money in the budget, but we needed to to add a change order for the additional asphalt that was laid.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else from the council? Anyone from the public? Seeing no hands, next item.
Item 4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend its contract for the rehabilitation of the sand filter building, and sand filter lift station at the wastewater treatment plant.
Anyone that lived here during Sandy saw porta potties on every corner because our wastewater treatment plant went down due to the flooding, and this is residual damage that we will be fixing at the wastewater treatment plant, and it also is positioning us to get the building in the correct shape if the outflow pipe interconnection and viaduct with the what's the one in Wanto, John? The wastewater. No, we're going to Bay Park, but then it's going out to Cedar Creek. So this is to handle that pumping station.
Any questions from the public? I mean, from the council?
The resolution mentions that the electrical feeders were subsurface, the ones that are being repaired. Are they going to be elevated, or are you repairing them in place and they'll still be subsurface?
They're going to be still subsurface. It's the only way to do it through the plant.
Okay. So, is there any way to harden them against?
Yep. You know, that plant was completely underwater. We do have an HMP project, a hazard mitigation project that's been already sent to FEMA for approval, which will harden the plant and prevent the flooding.
Okay, so that'll be done separately.
That's done separately.
Okay.
So, and just as a note, we have put this project, this change order, into FEMA as a PW project. We never closed out the complete project for the sand filters, so there's a very good chance we'll get reimbursed for this money. So, great.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the council? Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing no hands, next item.
Item 5 is a resolution authorizing publication of the general summary of the capital improvement program for the next 5 years, and authorizing publication of the general summary of the proposed budget for year July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, and notice of public hearings thereon. This item is for publication only. Hearings will be held May 1st and May 15th at 7 p.m. Item 6 is a resolution authorizing publication for hearing of a local law amending the charter of the City of Long Beach regarding sewer rents. This item is for publication only, and a hearing will be A hearing will be held May 1st at 7 p.m. Item 1 is a bond ordinance authorizing financing for cost of separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city, stating the estimated total cost thereof is $2,100,000, appropriating said amount therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $2,100,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation. Introduce and move the adoption of this item.
I will.
Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
This is one of these times where you feel like you got a gun held to your head. What I think needs to happen is this council and the city workforce representation need to sit down this week, sharpen the pencils, and work this out. I cannot rubber stamp this. I don't even have the information to know if this stuff is right. I'm sorry, I vote no.
Councilmember Mandel.
The reality is that these payments were already made. And I think at this point, what we need to do to be responsible and to avoid bringing the city to a standstill or a shutdown is to go forward with this, and then maybe the answer is to look to audit to see how the calculations were made, but not to conflate the two and punish our workforce or punish our residents by having a shutdown. So at this point, I would vote yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Okay, so tonight we learned, or I learned, that the bond for separation payment last year and the year previously was included as anticipated revenue. This is poor procedure. Good government lessens deficits, reduces taxes, and is also transparent with respect to sharing information regarding spending, sources of revenue, and the process for collecting and spending. Questions were asked tonight because now everything is in question. It's unfortunate that this item was not tabled for a special meeting so that other additional information could have been received. With that being said, tonight I'm calling for budget reform. We can no longer continue to do or to act in this way. We must have budget reform. The public cannot be left in the dark. In addition, the many questions that were raised this evening was only because of the fact that this was for the first time that I learned that the exempts were included in this separation payment. For years past, it was my understanding that the numbers that were shared with us were only with respect to police, fire, and CSCA, all of which in times past we've never had an issue with. But today, now that we have new information with respect to exempts, I will have to vote no because we must move forward with reform.
Vice President Diamond.
I think it's safe to assume that nobody wants to borrow money, nobody wants to vote to bond, and nobody wants to vote to pay for these expenses. However, in passing the budget last year, we made the conscious decision that separation pay would be bonded for in order to limit the amount of tax increase that was imposed on our residents. I, too, was not aware of the fact that this separation pay or these monies were paid to exempt employees and those who did not leave the city. However, it is my understanding that cannot be refunded now until there's an actual analysis of what and if it was paid properly. However, who was paid and why it was paid at this point and today is not the issue. We need to understand that our city will be shut down, our vendors will not be paid, our employees will be sent home if we cannot make payroll and we cannot pay for the expenses that we've incurred. This money has already been paid. With that said, what I will not do is vote to shut down the city and to send our employees home without pay. They are entitled to feed their families just as we all are. And with that, I vote yes.
President Aramo.
So no one is happy about this. As you may or may not know, this item has already failed. Since it's a bond, it did need supermajority, 4 out of 5. So it did, in fact, already fail, which means there is going to be some pain felt. There is going to be shutdowns. There is potentially going to be layoffs. Potentially all part-time employees might be laid off. Potentially police, fire, contracts will have to be looked at. So that's where we are. Unfortunately, these payments were paid. This bond was to pay for money we already spent on information that we all had. So my vote is yes.
Item 2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements for the operation of additional food trucks at the city's Riverside Food Market Smorgasbord. Introduce and move the adoption of this item.
I will.
Second.
I will.
Voting. Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Item 3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend the current agreement for asphalt overlay work. Would you just move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Second.
I will.
Voting. Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Item 4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend its contract for the rehabilitation of the sand filter building, and sand filter lift station at the wastewater treatment plant. Would you just move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Second.
I will.
Voting. Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Item 5 is a resolution authorizing publication of the general summary of the capital improvement program for the next 5 years, and authorizing publication of the general summary of the proposed budget for the year July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, and notice of public hearings thereon. Would you just move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Second.
I will.
Voting. Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Item 6 is a resolution authorizing publication for hearing of a local law amending the charter of the City of Long Beach regarding sewer rents. Would you just move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Second?
I will.
Okay. Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
We'll make a motion to close the meeting.
I will.
Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes. We now enter our good and welfare section. 3 minutes of uninterrupted time. Please remember to be respectful and maintain decorum. Joy McCarthy. Please state your name and address for the record.
Joy McCarthy. Am I on? Can they hear?
It's on.
All right. Joy McCarthy, 28 Wyoming Avenue. You know, so many of the people that work in this city are my friends and live here, so I'm in a kind of weird state right now. But
Me too.
But you had to do what you had to do. You know, something has to give. And unfortunately, I'm moving out of town in the next 18 months. And I'm up here tonight because I really feel like I have to do something. I have to say something for my neighbors. This can't continue. This is not sustainable. My husband is a New York City firefighter. He had a roofing business in town up until about 2 years after the storm. He also, with his brother, flipped about 5 houses in town till about 2008 when you couldn't really, the levels weren't great. He makes a good salary, and I got to stay home with my 4 kids. He wants to retire. He deserves to retire, and he deserves to retire well. And we can stay here, but I also have a special needs adult child, and I need to put money into his special needs trust, not pay it to, I'm pissed, to a city that's not fixing our potholes, to a city that sometimes feels like has a blatant disregard for the people that live here. And I've lived here for 50 years. I grew up here. This is my home. I grew up dirt poor in the West End when the West End wasn't trendy, okay? It wasn't trendy. You didn't want to say you lived in the West End, you know? And now I love it, and I have to leave it. I don't have to. I'm making a choice. I'm making the best financial choice for my family. And I'm not the only one. And I've talked to 4 or 5 different families. People have already left. My parents left a while ago. My mother-in-law left a while ago. It's just getting worse and worse. And I've come up here before. I haven't been here in a while. I didn't know you changed forms, whatever, because it just got to be tiring. And I got to tell you, some of the things, it's just the thing that I thought we could be snowbirds. I thought we could rent out our house. I was trying to manipulate things around to figure out, but like Roy said, that's not the way to do it. It started to feel more and more like dirty politics, more and more. And this is so hard for me, and but I'm gonna say it anyway. When I wasn't allowed to vote in a primary, that was wrong. It was just wrong, wrong. It's so hard. Because I want to be all smiles. I want to be, all good, and but I've got neighbors, and I want them to be able to stay and live where they want to live and have the life that they've worked really hard for. And so I'm hoping going forward, you figure out whatever you got to do. And these people with contracts, these contracts were signed by the city and by the workers, so it's their money. Whatever Jack did, I can't even discuss that. My 3 minutes are up. But I really hope for the people that I love and live here longer than I do, and I'm going to be here maybe 2 Novembers, that you work this out. It's unconscious. It's not sustainable. If taxes go up 20-25%, like I'm rumblings on Facebook, like my taxes will go from $20,000, because I'm very fortunate to own the lot behind me. It's going to be $26,000. That's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. The 30 by 120.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Ms. Volasevich. Ms. Cheston, if you want to start coming up, I'll call you whenever you're ready.
Mary Volasevich, Long Beach. Just to go back to what just went on here, I hold everybody here responsible for what happened here. I feel for the guys who live paycheck to paycheck. I think it's disgusting that they're being held hostage. And I think many years back on the school board, go back to that drawing board and look at your excess. There is always excess. And I think it's about time you do it, all right? Because we're getting a little tired of paying for people that can't even take the time to answer questions. What is good and welfare for? Someone tell me. Because all you do is listen, shake your heads, look at each other, and you don't answer a person. Here's a poor lady who her husband worked all his life, and he can't even stay here. I'm not far behind her. I am not far behind, and I have news for you. There are a lot of people, and God bless you all next November. And I'm not talking about Mr. Bendo just got on, or I'm not talking about Ms. Moore, but some of you were here a long time.
All of us were here.
Okay? And you're responsible. You should have known. And I said this last meeting, you should have known. How did you not know? My husband's family had a business. I knew everything going on in that office. The drivers, the nurses, I knew everything going on. And you sit here and let me tell you, the perception is not good. It really isn't. It's like you don't know what the hell is going on. And that's terrible. And we're supposed to trust you to do the right thing. I don't trust. I don't trust. I have no trust. And I have no trust for Mr. Schneerman because he knew this too. You overspent. You overdid. You did too much. You don't spend what I would love to have done my house over a lot different. I do what I can afford to do. My husband pays our credit cards every month in full. If you can't do and pay your bills, then don't overextend yourself. And you've done it time after time after time. Okay, I've said my piece now. I would just like to say the Northeast Bay Canal is having the cleanup Saturday. We hope to see some of you there. And we don't get paid.
Ms. Volasevich, I just want to add, where we are now is, because of the vote that was taken tonight, we now have to figure out how to move forward. And what I stated earlier, and I'm sure I'm going to get some nasty grams from some of the CSCA people tomorrow, but as I've said, this council, and this needs to happen over the next few days, not weeks, needs to be sitting down with labor representation, and we all need to sit down, and we're all in this together, and we need to fix this. That's what we need to do.
Can I just say one more thing? I don't think my time was up. You know, when it comes to election time, and all of you are in this, you all want that CSEA and the firemen and the police to back you up. Well, you failed them.
Miss Mona Goodman. Liz, if you want to make your way up, I'll call you whenever you're up here, okay? Mona left. Miss McGinnis, Karen McGinnis. Oh, well, it usually takes a little bit, so I figured I'd just, so you could take your time. Come on. I didn't want you to feel rushed, Miss Trustin, that's all. Okay. Good evening. Just state your name and address for the record.
Liz Trustin, Long Beach. I have to say I did prepare something for this evening, but I'm also appalled at what happened. Is there not a way that you can make a special announcement right now that you will meet to fix what just happened in the next few days so the city does not shut down and you don't send panic throughout the town?
I mean, there's definitely going to be some meetings, and definitely Rob and Mike already spoke that they're going to meet early tomorrow morning.
So that tomorrow we will know something that on Friday our garbage will still be picked up.
I don't know how long it's.
or-
I don't know. I can't give you a timeline. I don't know what's going to happen.
So then I'm going to quickly run through my other report. I
Thank you.
emailed, ironically, about the ethics committee and the budget. An independent audit was done in 2010, 2011, and I haven't received a response. I'm asking about the email as we were led to believe as of last May our financial state was something we should not worry about. I'm worried. And I want to know what happened. And obviously something did, and someone dropped the ball. Is this the method to find that out? Is deceiving unethical? Also noted, Mr. Aramo, I think it's presumptuous of you to think that residents all have smartphones to report something using the Response app. Not everyone does, nor access to computers and information electronically. Getting responsible and correct information to everyone is paramount, and we could do a better job. Speaking of which, why are you not going to stream the ACE meeting tomorrow, the Army Corps of Engineer? Is it a matter of overtime? That would require a response. Why are we not streaming the ACE meeting?
I think you emailed, right? And I think you got an answer to that it wasn't our meeting.
Wasn't. That was regarding the.
I thought Commissioner Tagney had emailed you
Gina,
back
acting on
And-
commissioners.
that we didn't have the capability to do it. That it wasn't our meeting. We're just hosting.
Well, where is Gordon? Is it not? It's right there. I mean, the commanding officers do a great job.
They do.
So what? I don't understand why we don't have the capability. We have the capability. It's just you don't want to do it, or we can't do it because of overtime. No one else knows how to use that machine. I don't know. I'm serious. I'm not being sarcastic. Although it's been noted that I have been snarky of late. But I'm asking a question. No? Yes?
I don't know the answer to your question. What I can tell you is I think we all saw the response from the city manager saying that it wasn't possible.
That was that wasn't.
No,
that
it was in
an
response. It was in response to your question regarding tomorrow's. I think it's tomorrow's meeting.
It is tomorrow's meeting.
Yeah, it's regarding. I think that and
But
I
if you
kind of
saw
just left it
Gina's
there. I don't know the
follow-up email, it wasn't.
I don't know the
actually
reason
in
why he
response
said that
to-
it was not possible. I'm just not aware. I know that he got back to you as soon after you responded.
So, getting
and
back.
just to note that in reality, it isn't our meeting, and I don't believe that the city streams everything that happens up here anyway. And
No, they only stream city council meetings, which no one knows
Right.
about either, because the official Facebook page never announces that there's a city council meeting.
well, we rely on our wonderful commanding officers to do it.
Do you pay them?
It was a joke. It was a joke.
Yeah, well, it went over poorly. So let's make some more jokes. Why are we even using Ustream? Is Gordon here? If someone could ask where he went and ask him if he's using, if we know if we're using the Enterprise Pro Broadcasting, because if that's the one that would be closed captioned for people that require that. And again, I'd like to thank the commanding officers for doing that job, because their YouTube channel is closed captioned. And again, city not following the ADA. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trustin. Ms. McGinnis. Please state your name and address for the record.
Karen McGinnis, 102 Pennsylvania Avenue. Dear council members, I just want to make sure that you are aware of the section 100A in the charter, which says that the submission of the budget and the budget message is to be received on or before the 10th day of April in each year. That means the city manager should have submitted to you a budget estimate for the ensuing fiscal year and an accompanying message. A copy of the submitted budget and budget message and all supporting schedules are to be filed in the office of the city clerk and be a public record open to the public for inspection no later than 10 days after the date of the submission of the budget to the city council by the city manager. That means the budget should be ready for review this Friday, April 20th. Separately from that, again, honorable members of the city council, I implore you to please not set up the new city manager for failure. I cannot stress enough the importance of this impending budget. It will impact the city for years to come. I ask that you please have the courage to make the tough decisions that need to be made. For example, exempt employees are not required to get raises, are not required to accrue overtime and vacation days and comp days in the private sector. It's time to really start to take a look at that. In addition, I ask that you consider changing auditors. Your auditors, ABZ, have been auditors since at least June 2013, and at this point, I surmise that they have been helping you to close the books for this past fiscal year. Auditors are supposed to audit. They're not supposed to help close the books. So again, I implore you to hire new auditors, and that's up to you, not the city manager.
Thank you, Ms. McGinnis. Ms. Rosado? Please state your name and address for the record.
Speaking for my mother, Narita Rosado, 340 West Chester Street, Long Beach.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of things that we wanted to go over. First,
Use the microphone, please.
Okay. The $4 million from FEMA, as the lady said, was expected in May. Is that money going to be used to pay back the bond?
That's different than
It's different
this.
apples and oranges. So
Yeah,
why
it's-
even bring it up?
it's
that
a
we're
different
getting,
potential
They
bond.
owe us $4 million, and you guys gave away $2.1 million. Why
That
was
item
it even-
failed.
It's not a bond, it's a note, and they're two separate streams altogether.
Okay, so the money was already paid, as we all have found out this evening, including the council. Why are we even having a meeting if it's already been passed? Why aren't the residents being made aware of all these things? And it's not on your website. I'm very active on Facebook, like you guys say, on social media. None of this. Nobody here knew that everybody was paid out already. How are you guys going to fix this? There's nothing said. Moving forward, what? How are you moving forward? We can't even move forward. We're stuck. What's going to be done here? And I agree with Mr. Bendo 100%, and I appreciate that he did mention that the deficit and the burden of all of this is going to land on not just me, which is I am the daughter of the homeowner, but my children. If we continue to keep piling up all this deficit and problems, the city is going to go bankrupt. The council needs to be aware of everything that's going on. We can't come to council meetings and hold up lists or say, oh, well, how many people? We don't know. Why is this one's getting paid that much? Nobody here on this council knows. There should be an itemized of every person, why they're getting the money. It's not just about Mr. Sherman. It's everyone on the list. Mr. Sherman, we all know Mr. Sherman was campaigning on our time. It was all over social media. We all saw it. Why is he being compensated? And Mr. Tagney's saying, oh, he never took a day off. We saw it. We all saw it with our own eyes. It should be reviewed. And as they said, New York Rising took it back from us. Then Long Beach needs to take it back if he doesn't deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. James Kirkland? Please state your name and address for the record.
Jim Kirkland, Long Beach, New York. Every meeting I come here, it's always kind of interesting and fun because it's so entertaining to see your expressions, your responses, in-depth discussions about things that are going on. What I always leave here with is the amazement that I don't think any of you have any appreciation or understanding or awareness of just how much you are disliked. No, disliked is too weak a term. Despised, even that's too weak a term. You are literally hated by just about everybody I speak to that lives in this city. And it's a terrible, terrible way to exist in life, to walk around knowing you are being hated, not because of who you are, but because of what you do. You ignore the people that come here from one time to the next. We never are told anything about what's going on until it's too late. And then we're told, if it's too late, well, we'll fix it next time, but there's never another next time. I moved into this city when it was so bad, people thought I was crazy to buy a home here. You were not permitted, not that you weren't permitted, you were advised by the police, don't go on the boardwalk at night. One morning I woke up, there was a dead body across my street. A week later, there was a dead body in the intersection of Penn and Riverside. And houses were being burnt down because there was a pyromaniac running around town who happened to work for the volunteer fire department. And so these are the kinds of things that existed back then. But I had faith in this community because the only people that were really doing anything that you might have looked down upon were the developers. But they were taking these old, rundown places and fixing them up and selling them and making a good profit. But at least they were repairing them, and they weren't doing it, you know, to satisfy the needs of other people who they were working with. So it seems as though we're almost going around full tilt, where we're at that point again where now we're willing to auction off the city to the highest bidder for the sake of sharing in probably what are going to be the benefits of all this development. And I think it's sad because it's almost like, you know, if it wasn't for what those original people did, we'd be living in Camden or Detroit or parts of Baltimore where you wouldn't even want to walk or drive down the streets. So if you think you're living in this city, if you don't take care of it now, it's not going to be worth living in when your children are ready to take your place. So I hope you keep that in the back of your mind. Whatever you're doing is going to come back to haunt you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nora Egan.
Nora Egan. So I came up here for a reason, but first of all, I just need to digress. Mr. Aramo, I am like so stunned that you said after I came up that council needs to meet on the payouts and everything. You act as like this just came up tonight, 5 minutes before you sat down here.
We were all given that list. When did we get the list? Monday.
But you knew that there was a potential of payouts coming out at least minimum of 2 weeks ago.
It happens at the end of every fiscal year. Not fiscal
right,
year.
And you've been
every
here.
Every calendar year, payments go out. Correct.
You've been here for numerous of these years. Yes. I witnessed the CSEA guys leave, and they're the ones that are going to be most hurt about this.
Correct.
They're my neighbors. They're my friends.
Which is why I voted to pass it.
But you put the onus on them, and
I
not.
didn't put any onus on them.
In my mind, you did by not taking the time. If you knew since Monday and not really taking the time to study this, and I understand and appreciate that you have another job and commitments, but you have a commitment to me as a taxpayer to do your duty and read what's on the agenda. I'm done. So my point was, for coming up here, we spent $30,000 on these planter containers things, and they're something. I don't know what they are, but they're an eyesore. So can you explain to me why we paid that? We're mid-April, and what is going on with them? Why do we continue to waste our money on things? Can we reach out to the chamber and maybe get a donation from them? Can we reach out to civics and maybe get a donation from each civic? Can we reach out to family members in your glossy flyer and ask a family to donate some flowers and pretty up our city? Anything?
Sure.
I'm asking you directly as my president.
Yes, but I don't foresee us buying any flowers anytime soon.
So we're just going to leave these eyesores.
I don't know what's going to happen. After not passing that bond, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
But did you reach out to the chamber?
We have a great relationship with the chamber.
Did you
and
reach
we
out
can
to
a-
the
we can ask
civics?
them.
But planting season is like now. I'm a member of the
Yeah,
Northeast Bay.
It all starts right about now. Is that correct, Commissioner? Right now is when the planting and the beach and everything starts to get going?
But the actual planters, did you reach out to any of the civics, to the chambers,
Did I?
to
No.
families, as a city, in your glossy flyer? Did you reach out like, oh, we would love this $30,000 planters to be something more than somebody leaving their shoe from from last night's night out in? Like anything?
I can't answer your question.
No, actually, I planted in my own yard 2 weeks ago, and they're fine. But I'm saying that you reach out to the civics or the chamber or the residents for help. I understand that we have no money, but we reach out to the community and get some help. Just a 2-line paragraph in your flyer. That's all I would have taken. Or one post on the Facebook page. That's it. The kids from school. Anything. The Boy Scouts, Girl Guides, Brownies, anybody. Just something
Flowers,
there.
I got it. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Eileen Hessian.
Eileen Hessian, I didn't really come up to talk
Thank
about
you.
flowers, but since it's open now, I'd say that instead of asking for donations from the community or anybody else, you should have asked people on the community if they wanted to spend $30,000 on those planters. They're obscene, they take up too much room, and they've just been gross. Also, when you plant the flowers in the malls, how about some perennials so we don't have to replace them year after year after year? What I really came up to say, though, was about this looking back at this extra money that was paid out. We used Jack as an example. He got about extra $50,000, but the list that Mr. Bendo held up had 10 or 20 people on it. If each of those 20 people had a mistake of $50,000 in their favor, we wouldn't need any bonds. So I suggest, well, I saw a newspaper article recently where somebody accidentally by their bank had $1 million put into their account. Do you think the bank ignored it and said, it's water under the bridge? I think they went back and said to the people, we made a mistake. And I think you should go back to Jack and go back to the payroll department or whoever it was that's making this mistake and so hold people responsible for the job that they're doing. Somebody made a big mistake there by about 50%, and there are other people on that list, maybe there are other mistakes. So please, I would like you to go back, write a letter to those people who owe us money, and say we made a mistake, send us a check. We need the money, even if it's for flowers. And go to payroll and find out who made these huge errors. I do remember, I think, if I'm correct, somebody didn't show up at a meeting once and we owe $50 million. They weren't held responsible either. There needs to be some responsibility in this city. Thank you.
Ms. Hessian, I just want to clarify something. That was those monies. You could write whatever letters you want, but they were reported as income to the IRS. So there is no mechanism for the city to get that money back.
And we don't know mistakes were made.
And even if there was a mistake, right? Assuming arguendo that there was a mistake made somewhere along the line, there is actually no, and I've researched this point extensively, there's no mechanism to recoup.
Okay, you're a lawyer and you know better than I do, but
excuse
I
me,
mean...
could I finish my response?
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Please do.
I just wanted to, I actually researched that point myself and spoke to several CPAs who all indicated once it's reported to the IRS as wages, there is no device to recoup it from the city.
Okay,
And also, by
so-
the way, it is, just to clarify, this is the employees, assuming no mistakes were made, again, it's the employee's property also. It's the payouts are the property of employees. So it works the same for union employees and exempt employees. So it is
Okay,
their money.
so it's their money because you gave it to them by mistake. Somebody made a mistake.
Well, you're assuming a mistake was made in the
I just
calculation.
heard it was, yes.
Okay.
That somebody's only allowed 50 days a year pay. I think it should be looked into, and I think somebody should be held responsible because that's a lot of money. And I think if it's happening in one spot, it's happening all over the place. I mentioned $50 million.
Thank you. Mr. Delory. Please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Mike Delory, Long Beach. Just two questions for council. When items are presented to the council to sign off, whether they're abstracts, bills, payments, or is that procedure done? In other words, per the state controller, usually people have to sign off that they've reviewed some kind of payment, whether it's a sheet, whether it's a summary of payments listing the vendor and the amount. Do you know if those items that are in question now were submitted to, I think these payouts occurred in either December, January, or February. So an elected official that took office in January may not have been attended at that meeting, but the other council members should have been aware. This is my problem, and the people here in the audience understand it real well. If, let's say you did work and your house is being constructed, and all of a sudden the contractor removes your stairs and says, you can't get in here until you give me the final payment. That's kind of like holding a gun to your head. I think the questions that Councilman Bendo asked, Councilwoman Moore addressed, it goes to a much bigger picture right now, is I don't think you guys are working together as a team. And that causes me problems because whether you agree with each other or not, you're serving people here and everybody else. We want you to make the right decisions because you all live here. So my question, Counselor, is this. Was the list presented to these council members at the time that the disbursements were made?
No.
No. Thank you.
Was it presented to any council member?
Not that I know of, no.
Let me repeat my question. Was it presented to any council member at that time?
No.
No.
Just to answer your question also, Mr. Delory, I think on the city council, that's correct, but I think you asked a question about internal procedure also, and I can answer that. The way payouts are generated is a voucher is submitted. The payroll supervisor then calculates the payout. It's signed off by the controller and ultimately the city manager before the payout occurs, and that's the internal procedure.
Use the microphone, please.
And this is what you're going to say is what I was talking about earlier. Going forward, there should be a different mechanism.
There's a lot of items that I could mention as improvements areas, but one is trust, which you will earn it down the road. The other is have a list of items that is planned to be expended. Just a summary list, you know. You have a computerized system, not you, but to be given to you. So you look at it and you sign off on it. Or you ask a question and then it's held until you get your answer. That's a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dubau.
Lou Dubau.
Thank you.
Question.
the nice weather, I actually got to the boardwalk last week or so, and I noticed that there are 4 jetties that were not done. There was something I downloaded from the Army Corps. There's supposed to be 18 jetties that were done. I don't know how many were done in the West End, but there are 4 from Neptune Boulevard. It's Neptune Boulevard, Long Beach, Magnolia, and Lafayette, I believe, are the 4 that were not done. Is that part of the plan? Is that why were 4 jetties not done in the middle
My
of
understanding is they're deemed not necessary to provide the protection that the jetties provide us with.
But
if I can add,
Why don't we have a commissioner come up and talk about it? Oh, I'm sorry, John. I didn't realize. You can finish, but why don't we just
When the
have him
Army
come?
Corps originally developed the plan, I believe it was in the 80s, 1986, they did an evaluation of the jetty condition at that time.
30s,
At that time,
31 years
they
ago.
determined some of the jetties did not need to be redone. The idea being the plan would have been done at that time.
Right.
Then the plan went and sat on a shelf for 30 years. The problem is the plan that was approved in 86 is the one that has to be implemented. Otherwise, the Army Corps has to go back to Congress and start the process all over again. So they had to follow the plan that was approved in 86, and that did not include rehabilitating all the jetties. The jetty on my block was not done either. I'm on Maryland.
Maryland, okay.
And my jetty was not done either. And it's a little bit of an eyesore, I guess, compared to the nice ones we got
Yeah,
now.
besides that, I mean, I happened to have been on the boardwalk, and it was a high tide, and actually the jetties that were not done, you don't even see the jetties. You see the new jetties, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is capturing sand and protecting the beaches. And now you're going to have these gaps that are not going to be protected. I mean,
Well, you'll see even less of them when they elevate the beach, when they pump the sand on the beach.
Right.
So,
right, yeah.
But the new jetties are performing their function. But again, they implemented a plan from 1986, and in 1986, those jetties
And that couldn't be
didn't need to be redone.
They couldn't update it. They couldn't revise it or anything. I guess. I realize this is more of a
Commissioner might
question
know
for
better,
tomorrow
but to my
night.
knowledge, no, that requires them to go back to Congress and start over.
Okay.
It was a question that we all had asked a number of times, and as the project continued to be completed, we saw the same thing that you saw. It was a question and concern that we had that we've either asked the commissioner or the Army Corps, and we've received that very similar answer, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. It just seemed, again, I was used to seeing everything up there through beginning part of the winter. The big machinery and stuff, and pretty cool watching that stuff. And then all of a sudden, there's nothing there. And then I read the flyer that came out saying that everything was done, and it was just like it didn't look like everything was done. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duval. Mr. Camden.
Steve Camden, 10 West Beach Street, Long
Thank
Beach.
you.
Thank you very much for the long evening work you guys always put in. I really appreciate that. On the comprehensive plan, which will be coming up eventually, okay, I just want to make sure we don't run into the same problem of not having the trust we need to get things done the way the town wants it done. We've done a lot of work for the last 3 years to come up with a comprehensive plan that is important they get for a city. So therefore, I've been trying hard to work with them for the last 3 years to make sure that the town buys in, that the town owns it with us. So we all want it together. And it really has not gotten that level yet. A shame. We've done, I know they've worked very hard, 18 public meetings. They can do a bunch of stuff to say it's been done, but my fear is the heart's not behind it still. So I'm trying to help get that done. I think if each one of you appoint 3 people that you want, that's 15 people, and we just do 1 month of meetings week after week and investigating between the 15 people you guys trust so you guys can own it too, that would be a big help. So when you come up here to vote on something, the first public meeting, it's not what's been happening. I've been involved for 3 years. I'm scared this could be passed without the conviction of the town. That's scary, okay? A comprehensive plan is vital to everything we're going to do. So please, help us own it with the community, okay? That's the vital part of this whole thing. Without this, I was on the one before this in '07, and it sat on the shelf because we didn't own it. I worked hard, but we had so many managers going through at that time, there was never a city council that bought in. This plan was put together by Jack and a few people there. That scares me. I like the people who are working. I'm not coming against the people who worked hard to do this. But my fear is because of the trust issue, we're going to fall apart again without the proper planning. Okay, so please help us own this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gustler.
Mr. Camden, I'm sorry, Mr. Camden, before you leave, can you just specifically just elaborate a little bit with respect to what you're asking the council to do? Because
Sure.
we have had meetings, and obviously I've attended a lot of the meetings. You were there. The community's input is paramount in terms
Sure.
of what we do. So are you asking for additional meetings, a different type of outreach?
We have
Can you
there's committee.
specify?
There's a committee group that was formed that's part of this. I've been part of that the whole 3 years.
Yep.
It's been very poorly activated amongst the committee of people. You'll see it in the comprehensive plan. There's a sheet of the people who are on it. Okay, I think there's one meeting, 2 meetings. There've been about 6 meetings of us, but it's very poorly worked on between us. So I don't feel any community within the I guess there's 30 people on that page. I don't feel any commitment amongst us. So if at least let's spend another month, okay, where you guys each name your own 3 that you trust to be in this room, listening, debating, fighting for this, and have an honest debate, okay, amongst the people who really are understanding the subject. That would be great. You know how hard it is when people come up here and a learning curve. They don't understand what they're talking about yet. They're just good-hearted people. So you know that learning curve, how frustrating it is. So if you get the 15 people that know what's going on together for 1 month, every week talking, that way before this public meeting, you have a real sense of the comprehensive plan internally by not just you, but 3 people you trust.
So you're referring to the advisory board?
Thank you.
Okay, because it wasn't clear. You kept saying this
The
group.
Community Advisory Board.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Camden. Mr. Gustler.
Hi, good evening again. Jay Gustler, Long Beach. I'd just like to commend council members Bendo and Moore for their courage in voting the way that they did on that bond issue tonight. No doubt they're going to face some repercussions. You guys have already tried to point the finger at them and blame them for the pain that you anticipate resulting from the failure to pass this bond. But I would submit that that pain is your responsibility. Your responsibility, meaning Mr. Mandel, Mr. Aramo, Ms. Diamond, the 3 of you guys have basically excluded Ms. Moore and more recently Mr. Bendo from the equal participation in the government process. So for them, you get a pass on this. You guys, if there's any finger pointing to be done, it's you. Now, in terms of things that could sort of blunt this, Mr. Agostisi said that some of these payments, I think Mr. Bendo said 14 of the recipients of these funds are exempts. Now, the exempts, I know that their compensation or their payouts are somehow tied to the CSCA contract, but Mr. Agostisi said that the basis for those payments is the city code. City code is silent on any requirement that they be paid within a certain amount of time. So if these exempt employees asked for a pay down, the city wasn't obligated to do it. If these exempt employees leave and they're owed X amount of dollars in time, they don't have the right under the charter or the code to demand immediate payment. So I don't know where any right to demand that flows from. So assuming that they don't have that right, that means that somebody made a conscious decision to fulfill their requests for this money. So that's the person who really, you talk about the $2.1 million it's already spent, we got to bond it now. That person, and I assume that person was Jack Schneeman, that's the culprit. That's the guy that did it. But since we're in belt-tightening mode, maybe we should think about not sending out $5,000 glossy mailers. You know, this talk of layoffs, police, hourlies that I believe you referenced, Mr. Aramo, there are other employees who make a lot of money who do nothing. There are a couple I can think of right off the bat who sat and created fake Facebook pages while on city time during this past campaign season. If those guys are sitting there playing on Facebook, making fake pages, they clearly don't have much to do. So you might want to consider trimming there as well. That would be the fifth floor millions that I was talking about that you deny the waste exists. It's also come to my attention that several of the concessionaires on the boardwalk haven't paid their rent in quite some time. How about we go after those guys and get the rent money that the city, that the taxpayers owed before we start worrying about bonding? And in terms of Mr. Tagney's claim that Mr. Schneerman never took his time, that guy was campaigning for about a year straight before he separated from service. He was never in City Hall except for his meetings here. You're telling me he wasn't? He was. I think I asked you guys once, and you said, "Oh, he's burning his vacation time when he's out campaigning." So which is it? Was he on vacation or wasn't he? Have a good night.
Mr. Sam Pinto.
I just want to address something as Mr. Pinto comes forward. First of all, I think it's very important for everyone here to understand that this is a team. I know that you've heard several accounts, newspaper accounts, social media accounts. We do work as a team. I want to make that clear. And we have to understand one key thing, that we can agree to disagree, okay? That's what a team is about. There are times when we have to make hard decisions and we're not going to agree, but that doesn't mean that we're not a team. And everyone that's here, this day is here, is still worthy of respect because they hold the office. So let's be clear about that. Second of all, this is really about accountability, all right? In terms of what happened today, yes, it's a shame what happened today, all right? It was very painful what happened today. And I'm sure everyone here, everybody's disappointed about what happened today, all right? Having said that, right, this is about the fact that we're not trying to punish members of the police force, members of the fire department, or members of the CSEA. But we had a responsibility today, and that is to make sure that this information is out in the open. This is about transparency. Do we still need to fix it? Yes. Are we going to get together and fix it? Yes. I can openly say that with confidence that yes, we will do that. But in the meantime, we still have a responsibility to make sure that this information is out to you so that you understand why we're making the decisions that we're making. Third of all, accountability, all right? When I was elected and I started day one in 2016, I worked with this team. And one of the first things we did, because obviously at that particular time, the person in conversation, our former city manager, he was moving forward with a new contract. I worked with every member on this team with the exception of councilmen, well, two people who are new to the council. At that particular time, we worked to draft what we considered to be an evaluation for our city manager. I worked with this team to draft that because I asked for an evaluation. The evaluation was included with that city manager's contract. However, that evaluation was never extended or never in any way implemented during that period of time. So having said that, we have to go back again and look at all of these things. Accountability is critical. Maybe, just maybe, if that evaluation was used back in 2016 or 2017, maybe we wouldn't be where we are right now. But having said that, now we can't change that. We have to move forward. But it's important for all of us to understand and for you to share with all of the other residents that accountability right now, unfortunately, has caused what's happened today. And so we're going to have to, and that's why I'm calling for reform so that we can change that. Can we fix that tonight? No, we can't fix that tonight. But at least we can begin that dialogue so that we can become healthy and whole. And that's really what I believe everyone on here wants us to be. They want us to be healthy and whole, regardless of the decision that was made tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mr. Pinto.
Good evening, Sam Pinto, Long Beach. Real quickly, so I have to just agree with Ms. Moore on this. It's about accountability, it's about transparency, but it's more about the lack thereof, and it's also the communication issue. We have a lot to do together, and I think that You also can't go and blame the fiscal challenges of what's going on right now if there's impending layoffs or things like that, because last week before this was voted down, there was already talk of a 25% tax increase. There was already the talk of layoffs. There was already talk of cut services. So to try to pawn it onto this bond getting voted down, and I'm a city worker. I'm going to probably feel the pain as well. It's not the right thing to do, because prior to this bond being voted down, there was already talk of a 25% tax increase. There was already the talk of the budget not even being presented yet. I mean, we don't even have a city manager right now. We don't have a full-time city manager, a full-time permanent city manager. We don't have a comptroller. So you really can't push all the pain of this event on this bond. The city's in a bad spot. And it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of honest, transparent communication. And two things that I noticed is that a lot of this was shock or new. The union contracts have been written out. There is really no surprises in these union contracts. The only thing that seemed very uncertain was the system for payouts for these exempt employees upon their separation. That seems to be the big question. So don't go on blaming. I'm not saying each of you specifically are doing that. The union contracts, because those have been negotiated over years. The council's been part of that. The labor union's been part of that. The real question is the uncertainty of these exempt positions and their expeditious payouts. One more thing I want to notice today, because it didn't get brought up, but I noticed two great things in our city that will go unnoticed because tragedy was averted. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to the CSEA workforce who during the middle of the night to the early morning fixed and repaired a fire hydrant pipeline underground, which is no easy task. That helped ensure that we had safe water uninterrupted in case of the event of a fire for a big part of our community, which many people may not know what happened. They did a great job, and I want to commend them on that. And the second thing is I want to commend the fire department, because we had a fire tonight, and the building is still standing, and it's in great condition. And it's because the fast, the trained, the efficient system that we had where people came in, they put the fire out before it got bad. So two things that people are not screaming, crying about right now is no fire hydrants and a building burning down, and that can't go unnoticed. So before you go and want to cut services, remember that we still have to deliver public service, and don't go against the police, the fire, the part-time workers, and the CSEA, because they deliver a very, very valuable service to the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this evening. Thank you, and get home 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 this evening. Thank you.